to, well, it's gone 4:45. This is Rights, Rorts and Rants presented by Blue Mountains Unions and Community. The traffic is getting worse on the highway. People, you can tell, they want to break out of the city and come up to the mountains. And you don't have to be a genius to work out why, because one of the main reasons people escape the city and visit the mountains is to find some peace and quiet in an increasingly noisy world. And nothing shatters the peace quite like an aircraft flying low overhead. Now, regular listeners to this program will know there's been a long-running battle over the future of Katoomba Airfield. The company's plans to run joy flights out of the airport were met with strong resistance in the community. So much so that the Department of Planning and Industry and Environment in January refused the company's application for a long-term lease. But if you thought that was the end of it, you'd be wrong. There are now fears that the joy flight plans could make a comeback. To find out what went wrong, I'm joined in the studio by two members of the Katoomba Airfield Community Group, Bronwyn Stowe and Mary Marlow. Welcome to Rights, Rorts and Rants.
Thanks.
What went wrong?
Well,
I know it's a complicated story, but
it is
basically
indeed.
it hasn't been stopped as yet. It's still up in the air.
Well, the lease was not outright refused by the department. It was refused in its current form back in January, and the department informed the lease applicants that they could resubmit minus the use of helicopters in and out of the airfield.
So they could have a proposal which didn't include helicopters.
Yes.
So in other words, the joy flights would be what sort of aircraft?
Well,
Do we know?
we didn't know. We thought that would be the end of it, because really we felt that the lease application, as much as we actually knew about it, because we never actually saw any detail during the community consultation, we thought that would be the end of it. It wouldn't be a viable business.
Well,
If you're going to make money out of it.
helicopter pilots, so we assumed that without helicopters, they would not proceed without applying for a new lease that only used fixed wing. Because the airport really isn't, the airfield isn't really viable for fixed wing business anyway.
At the moment, the runway could be reworked to some extent, and very small fixed wing aircraft could probably be accommodated, because it's quite short.
Yeah. So you think what they're going to do is resubmit, but without helicopters?
So
no.
what they decided was to try and get the decision overturned. So they complained on the basis that the consultation was unfair.
One-sided, really.
And the department's response was to commission a review into the consultation process. And if you read the terms of reference, the consultation process was strictly about basically finessing how it was done.
The process.
The process, so for future
Consultations,
because it's a new strategy.
So just on that, I mean, what I've got here, which I've read in the Gazette, and I think is correct, there were over 1,500 submissions, individual submissions or collective submissions, and 85% opposed.
Yes.
That's a pretty big figure, you know.
Yes.
What were the main objections? Let me guess. We're talking noise.
Yes, noise pollution was a big factor. There was concern about water quality impacts because
Water?
Yes,
How
because there are significant catchments adjacent to the airfield, and also
runoff.
Yes, and also fuel from the use of the aircraft while they're in the air.
The effect on the national park, they're water.
Because originally, the airfield was supposed to go into national parks, wasn't it? I think it was originally some sort of wartime thing, and then after the war,
the army had an interest in it when the airfield was actually gazetted. Sorry, when the park was gazetted, but a few years later, a lease was proposed by Crown Lands, and the agreement between National Parks and Crown Lands was that at the termination of that lease, it would go to the National Park.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's been a long history since then.
Yeah, and it's quite a complicated history, but the long and short of it is, it didn't go into national parks,
It didn't.
despite
No.
There
a lot of
has
people
been-
wanting to.
That's
You'd
right.
think that would be the obvious, logical thing to do.
Yes, there was a lot of commitment along the way, but it never
Well,
translated
people,
into...
what about, say, the council? What's their position? been?
Yeah, they've had a long-held position that it should be incorporated into the surrounding national park.
In 2008, they...
Mm. There was an assessment because the lease was about to come up for renewal again, and both, I think, NPWS, National Parks, and the council were conferred with and made the recommendation that the land should be incorporated.
Yeah.
But we don't exactly know why that didn't proceed.
Well, it seems
But there was
Mary, there's a lot of things we don't know.
a hell of a lot.
Do we know how many flights there'd be, how often and where, roughly?
No, we
Well, they
have
didn't
never.
put that in the proposal?
No. Well, it may well be known to Crown Lands,
But
but
what,
it's
Crown Lands isn't releasing this information if it's there?
They're saying that's not part of the lease, right? So that's, the number of flights, I think, is controlled by the EPA,
Right.
so they don't, it's not
Well,
part of the lease.
yeah. We're not sure. We're not exactly sure whether there hasn't been some stipulation, but publicly, everyone is saying that that it is too difficult to determine exactly the number of flights.
No, but you could have a ballpark figure, couldn't you?
Absolutely,
You know,
which is
I mean,
a
you've got-
bottom
if you've got
line
if
for a
you've got
business case.
plan,
Yeah.
You've got to say,
Yeah.
well, to make this work, we need to have so many flights.
Yeah.
That's right,
I mean,
We've never been able to.
Business case,
It's
Yeah.
always been
the bottom line.
commercial in confidence.
Okay, well, I'd imagine there were supporters of the proposal. What were they saying? I'd imagine, was one of the arguments this will create jobs?
Very few, actually. It
Yeah.
was- A lot of the supporters were aviation enthusiasts,
Mm.
and so, yeah, were there any businesses? Like, doesn't,
So what were they
Stand
saying?
around.
What was the case for?
they said for safety, that it needed to be there for emergencies,
Emergency.
you know, planes,
As a safety ramp,
as a safety ramp for planes, you know.
and also emergencies for like bushfire, etc.
Right.
But,
But
you know,
that,
the
that,
public,
that could happen without a commercial enterprise being there, couldn't it?
absolutely, and the public has never been against that idea. In fact,
Yeah.
quite supportive that
And-
it should be used for that purpose.
But, and the Rural Forest Service has said they don't need it. They barely used it during the last bushfires, and they,
Well, if they're going to use it any time, it would have been then, wouldn't it? Because
Yeah,
there were
that's
fires everywhere.
yeah.
Yeah.
They used it in a limited capacity, and then they
Right.
moved their operations. It's not essential to their.
What's
to
it
their
like? I
function.
haven't been there for a while because it's always confusing. Actually, Katoomba Airport is in Medlow Bath. That's the first confusion. But what's it like these days?
You can't get in.
No, well, it's a bit hard to assess right at this moment, but I
It's not
suppose.
being used at all. Is that the
Oh,
case?
yes. No, well, I don't think they are doing anything. There's certainly no flights, is there?
No, I haven't. You know, we're not too sure, to be honest. I don't think there's much activity, and
Well,
it's
can't for helicopters
probably
anyway.
no. It's not certainly not recreational. I believe I'm not exactly sure about this, but I believe that there may be an industrial reason for using it. For instance,
sure.
Origin Energy or someone
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
You know, and certainly it's still open for emergencies. As RFS can access it
Yeah.
whenever.
So you've got what is it, the Department of Planning saying that another report is being prepared, another evaluation of the lease
Yes.
application.
They
So
haven't
who-
said
who-
why.
No. Funny that. Who gets to have a say in that? Can you then submit to that re-evaluation?
No,
No.
no.
So who's submitting to that?
The lease proponents have been asked to provide feedback, I think it's called, following the department providing more information
Right.
as required by the review.
Yeah.
So all the feedback that was not documented sufficiently from the public forums, and between the period January 2019 up into decision, wasn't it, I think, in terms of reference, that not all that consultation by the department with other agencies of interest was documented. So there was quite a lot of missing information, which the Commissioner felt might have...
altered their decision?
Well, it's hard to say whether alter it, but it was not... All the information wasn't necessarily on the table for the decision makers. So they are now adding an addendum to the summary of their of outcomes document, and for some reason, you know, it clearly states in the terms of reference that this is meant to be used for future consultation processes, but somehow we find ourselves looking down the barrel of perhaps definitely a reappraisal of that decision that was made to refuse them the lease.
So, like one of the disturbing aspects of this is the claim by Fly Blue in this article that they were given assurances by the department, and that all they needed to do, they should just trust the process and it would all be okay. I mean, it implies that they were given a verbal go-ahead, and the community process put a spoke in that for them.
Yeah, well, they also say, referring to the same article in the Gazette, that lots of lies were told.
That's right. And you mentioned joy flies. We didn't know initially what their plan was, and our objection really was to commercialisation of the airfield. So they say they weren't going to do joy flights, but in their...
Hang on, if they weren't going to do joy flights, what were they going to do?
They were going to bring people from Sydney.
Ah, I see.
Yeah.
And
So
then
just
further.
And further on.
And further on.
Just, right, it's just another way of getting to the mountains then, is it, rather than in a car or a train? Is it?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's what they say.
But they do mention scenic heli charters of not less than 30 minutes duration on their website.
Don't go the long way around.
Well, that suggests...
It does.
We'll call it a scenic flight. A scenic flight, a joy flight, by any other name. I mean, to the public, it amounts to the same thing.
Yeah, I know. Look,
it's semantics, really, for PR purposes.
I want to thank you both for coming in. And just last two questions in a way. What are you going to do next? And what would those people, and it is the majority as far as we know, who don't want this to happen, what can they do?
Well, there's always people to write to.
Yep.
In these times. So Katoomba Airfield Community Group is suggesting that concerned residents make their voice heard to Minister Rob Stokes.
Planning Minister Stokes,
yep. Probably Minister Matt Keane, National Parks,
Minister,
Trish Doyle, local member.
Yep.
Because she's a strong advocate, and she was last time. I think she's pretty much surprised at this outcome. And the Gazette.
Okay, so just to sum up, you write to the ministers, Environment Planning, local MP Trish Doyle, and the Gazette.
And the local paper. And if anyone has any other connections they can use in that regard, well, I'm sure we'd be only too happy
and if they want to contact you, what's the best way?
The website
You've got a website.
and
So the website, put in a search engine, what?
Katoomba Airfield Community Group.
And we'll find you there. Well, thank you both for coming in.
Oh, thank you very much.
Good luck with the campaign.
Yeah, thanks again. That's great, Nick. Thank you.
Many restrictions